It is the mega deal that could enrich America, the trial horrifying the music industry, and the public apology more than 30 years in the making. I'm Elizabeth Vargas, and America's News starts right now. Tonight, could the Sean Combs trial get any more shocking? The answer is yes. Combs' ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura is back on the stand testifying about brutal, explicit violence and abuse. Images of alleged freak-offs shown to jurors. And what did a self-described male sex slave have to do with it all? Then mea culpa Menendez edition. The convicted killers own up to decades of lies, possibly helping them earn their freedom. It's the public apology the Los Angeles district attorney has been waiting for. Is he satisfied? We'll ask him live. And later, NewsNation brought it to you first. It's a big deal for Boeing, but could it be an even bigger deal for American workers?
It's the largest order of jets in the history of Boeing. That's pretty good. Get those planes out there. Get them out there.
How the company's new contract with Qatar could mean a jobs boom in at least one state. And it's good to have you with us on this Wednesday night. We begin in New York City with the second day of explosive testimony from Cassie Ventura, Sean Diddy Combs' ex-girlfriend in the music mogul's federal sex trafficking trial. Yesterday's testimony focused on the freak-off marathon sex sessions that Cassie says Combs forced her to take part in, some lasting as long as 4 days. Today, the focus shifted to physical violence. When Ventura got back on the stand, she described what happened after Combs savagely beat her at a Los Angeles hotel back in 2016. A warning, this video is graphic and may be hard to watch. Ventura testified that she was left with a black eye and a busted lip after the assault you're seeing here. She said she didn't fight back because she didn't want to provoke Combs to commit further violence. She said she fled to her apartment in an Uber after the attack and got a series of text messages from Combs that started with, "You're going to abandon me all alone? Call me," before he showed up at her place and started banging on the door. Ventura said she had to cover up the bruises from that beating with makeup and sunglasses at a movie premiere just days later. Ventura also testified that Combs raped her in her living room after she started seeing her now husband, Alex Fine, in 2018. And yet after all that, she said she had sex with Combs again at a later time, but by choice, she says, explaining, quote, "You don't just turn off feelings that way. I still had a good vision of who he was as a person." Now, the defense will likely pounce on that as they claim that all this alleged freak-off sex was consensual and that the video of the hotel beating proves domestic violence, a state crime, but not sex trafficking and racketeering, the federal crimes for which Combs is on trial. At one point today, Cassie was presented with a binder of photos and was asked to identify 13 of those male escorts who allegedly took part in these freak-offs. She identified one of them as Jonathan Odie, a man who claims he was Diddy's sex slave. That man is now in prison in Miami after he got into a shootout with police at Trump National Doral Golf Club in 2018. He spoke exclusively with NewsNation's Allison Weiner from prison about what these freak-off sessions were like.
Candles, sensual atmosphere, lights off. He would sit in a corner in a sofa, watch and masturbate. And he'd say, he'd tell her, give her instructions what to do to me. Perform oral sex, rub baby oil. Then he'd tell me rub baby on her, perform oral sex, and then have sex.
How many times did you have sex with Cassie?
Probably like 15 sessions.
And what did you get paid? How much?
It would be like 800 each time.
Now, prosecutors finished their direct examination of Cassie Ventura late today. Tomorrow, it will be the defense's turn. Let's get right now to our legal panel now. Mark Eiglarsh is a criminal defense attorney, and Lisa Bonner is an entertainment attorney and former litigator. Great to have both of you here. Lisa, I'd like to start with you. we had some pretty horrendous details about severe beatings and injuries from both the beatings and the freak-off sex parties. Cassie Ventura was testifying about urinary tract infections, mouth sores. She developed a dependence on drugs. To have a 9 months pregnant woman testifying about all this probably made a pretty lasting impact on the jury.
I would absolutely agree, Elizabeth. Yesterday's testimony was really just focused on what the freak-offs were and establishing the basis of what they were. And today's testimony was a lot more explosive. They really honed in on the graphic details, the beatings, the humiliation, the degradation, and everything that you had outlined in terms of the mouth sores and all of the things that physically happened to her. But the interesting thing is in order to prove sex trafficking, you have to prove that you moved the plaintiff over state lines for the purposes of sex through force, coercion, or fraud. And when you see the videos, when you see the photos and hear the graphic details, it was clear, at least in my opinion, what the prosecution is alleging, that she did not have consent, that she was trafficked against her will. And this is not a domestic violence case. Each party has laid that out in their opening statements.
Mark, Cassie, and we're going to get to what the defense is going to do tomorrow morning in a second, but also today, members of the jury were shown on individual monitors images of these freak-offs, and the jury really reacted to this. One jury shook his head, another juror took a deep sigh and put her hand on her chest. You could see it was very, very visibly they were reacting.
Yeah, how do you not? I mean, this is no one's reality. This guy, they now believe, is violent, vile, immoral, raunchy, and they hate him, which is why the defense said in their opening, you're going to feel those ways about him, but he's not a criminal. So what this case comes down to is it rape or is it regret? Was she raped? Did she not consent? Was she forced to do this due to his violence and his assault? Or did she consent? Was she there because she enjoyed the benefits of being with him? Is she just regretting her actions? All that is going to be discussed on cross-examination. Don't judge this case just yet.
Mark, she did name members of Sean Combs' staff, however, who were present for many of these severe beatings, who sometimes went to go back and retrieve her when she tried to flee and bring her back to him. Doesn't that prove that she was trying to leave? She was trying to get out?
Absolutely. In fact, when you start the case off with a video showing that he made her his own personal piñata, these jurors hate him. They think that he's violent and someone who absolutely could do what she's alleging. That said, again, there's a reason why he turned down this plea deal. There's a reason why there is a great attorney representing him. In cross-examination, you're going to see them, little by little, try to undermine her credibility by alleging you had numerous opportunities to leave this relationship and you chose to stay in there. Thus, it's consent. So what I'm saying is this case hinges upon the government's ability to show how a domestic violence victim sometimes stays even though they want to leave.
Lisa, defense will begin its cross-examination tomorrow morning. This is going to be tricky for them.
Yes. And you have to walk a fine line because she is 8 months pregnant. She is visibly disturbed. She is in a happy marriage. She has healed. She talked about her suicide attempt. So one of the things that you want to make sure is you are not really triggering more of these emotional memories than she is already broken down, and you don't want to exacerbate that situation.
Right.
And I want to point out something. R. Kelly was convicted just across the river in the Eastern District of New York for RICO charges and very, very similar charges. With some of them involved minors, but many of them didn't. And if you look at the complaint and then what the jury came down with their decision and the judge's decision, and it is verbatim what is charged in Sean Diddy Combs, and he was a lot less violent than Diddy was. R. Kelly was lots much less violent.
Mark, very quickly, what can we expect to see as the cross-examination begins tomorrow morning?
Well, first, they're going to repeat a lot of the things she already said, which I found intriguing. Wait, you didn't just attend the freak-offs, you were in charge of them. Her own words were, it became like a second job for her. So then the defense is going to say, well, then you were in charge of who attended the freak-offs. So they're going to say she's the one who hired these prostitutes from somewhere outside the state. He didn't know that. He delegated that to her. He doesn't know. And while civilly he'd be responsible, criminally you'd say he just didn't know. It doesn't prove the case.
Yeah.
I know. It's going to be challenging.
It's going to be really, really challenging, and it's going to come down to Cassie Ventura and the impression that she has made and will continue to make under what I'm sure will be an unpleasant cross-examination for her. Mark Eiglarsh, Lisa Bonner, thank you both so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Coming up for us, the Menendez brothers are one step closer to freedom after a judge resentenced them to life in prison with the possibility of parole. Next, I'll speak live with both L.A. District Attorney Nathan Hochman, who opposed this, and with a cousin of the Menendez brothers who was praying for their release. And later...
You think anybody has been killed because they knew too much on the stuff?
The UFO whistleblower who sat down with investigative journalist Jeremy Corbell on his Weaponized podcast gives the most detailed account yet of UFO videos that he claims the government is collecting and hiding from the public. Jeremy Corbell joins me live in a bit.
Thank you for joining me here on NewsNation.
No matter where you are, America's fastest growing, down the middle, unbiased, breaking news coverage is always at your fingertips. Download the NewsNation app or go to newsnationnow.com to learn how.
After 35 years behind bars for the shotgun murders of their parents, tonight Eric and Lyle Menendez have new hope for freedom. This after a long and emotional hearing yesterday, capped by a judge's surprisingly quick decision last night to resentence the brothers. The ruling reduces their original life without parole sentence to 50 years to life, making them eligible immediately for parole. The stunning decision was met with tears of joy from family members who have long supported the brothers' release. Several of them testified in court to the brothers' rehabilitation behind bars.
Ultimately, we are here today with this result because of Eric and Lyle, because they chose to live their lives with clarity and a purpose of service that the judge was impressed by. And so a huge thanks to them, too, for being the kind of people that we could bring home.
I really hope that this sets the precedence for other LWOP inmates who have shown transformation and change. Eric and Lyle and created careers for themselves and created new hopes for themselves while they have been incarcerated.
Now, Eric and Lyle also addressed the court in a video feed from their San Diego prison, both taking responsibility for the brutal 1989 murders. Lyle, who was 29 years old at the time of the killing, said, quote, "He made the choice to kill my mom and dad in their own home. I offer no excuse, and I don't blame my parents," adding, "I'm deeply ashamed for what I did." While Eric, who was 18 at the time, said he has, quote, "profound sorrow for the tragedy I created. I took the lives of my mom and dad. I fired all 5 rounds at my parents and went back to reload. I lied to police. I lied to my family. I am truly sorry." Their apologies notwithstanding, it still could take months before the brothers are released. If they're released, the next step in their bid for freedom is on June 13th at a hearing before the state parole board on clemency petitions, and then they go to Governor Gavin Newsom to ask for his clemency. The decision over the brothers' fate now largely is out of the hands of the Los Angeles County District Attorney, Nathan Hochman, who's been outspoken on his belief the brothers were not yet ready to get out of prison. The DA also pointed to a recent decision by Governor Newsom to deny parole to the notorious Sirhan Sirhan, who's in prison for murdering Robert Kennedy in 1968. He says that's precedent for the brothers' case. And Nathan Hochman joins me now. Welcome back to the show. Great to have you here. So you argued against resentencing the brothers. Why do you think the judge ruled against you?
What we argued about was that resentencing could occur maybe in the future, but not not based on these facts. And we think that the judge took into account the facts, which was our job. Our job was to present all the facts and the law to the judge. The prior district attorney in his motion left off 75% of the facts. So we went back into the records. We dug deep. 50,000 pages of transcripts, hours and hours of videotaped testimony, hundreds of pages of prison files. We interviewed the family members. I personally spoke to the Menendez family members for over 3 hours, and we presented all those facts to the judge.
Right.
Ultimately, the judge decided that there was enough evidence in the record that he would send this case effectively over to the parole board.
You said justice should never be swayed by spectacle after the decision last night. Is that what you think happened here?
Well, what I think happened, and what I want to make sure doesn't happen in the future, is that if there's any idea that because you're the Menendez brothers, because you come from a certain family, because you have a Netflix special, that somehow the LADA's office is going to treat you differently, that it's going to treat the dozens or hundreds of requests that we're going to get from convicted murderers seeking resentencing.
How much of a factor do you think that Netflix special, that documentary, that series was on this case?
Well, I think it was quite influential on my predecessor, who 12 days before an election, without any money left in his campaign coffers and 30 points down in the polls, decided to tap into the media spectacle that was the Menendez case by going ahead and filing the prior motion. What we did once we had that motion already filed is we dug deep and did that thorough and extensive review. And what we came up with is that the Menendezes have made many steps towards the progress of rehabilitation, but they weren't there. They just weren't there at this time. If they do get there, we were willing to reconsider our opposition to resentencing.
The judge said that, quote, these were horrific crimes, but that he was actually swayed by the number of corrections officers who came out supporting the brothers' release.
Well, what's interesting, and you referenced that Sirhan case before, in the Sirhan case where the parole board actually granted parole and Governor Newsom reversed that grant of parole, Sirhan had a number of letters from prison officials backing his rehabilitation and his parole. But ultimately, the governor said in that case that because Sirhan had not completely accepted full responsibility for all his criminal actions, which is the same position we've been taking in the Menendez case, that factor outweighed the pro-parole factors in Sirhan's case.
Yeah.
It'll be very to see what the governor does with the Menendez brothers.
You cited the state risk assessment report of the brothers, which said that they're at a, quote, moderate risk of reoffending. How many people get released with this moderate risk as opposed to a low risk?
Well, again, the part of the significance of it being a moderate risk is that it rose. The Menendez brothers used to be a low risk. But over the last year, while they were awaiting resentencing in a structured environment, which is a prison, they again decided to engage in illegal behavior, deceitful illegal behavior. And what the board certified psychologists that the Board of Parole hired to do a very comprehensive risk assessment said is that because they effectively don't get it, that they have not changed their behavior while in prison, while waiting resentencing, when you would assume they'd be on their best behavior, that their risk level has now risen from a low risk to a moderate risk of violence if they're set free.
So bottom line, if the governor of California decides to release them, do you think he's making a mistake?
Well, again, the governor is going to look through the same factors he looked in, for instance, the Sirhan case.
Right.
We'll see whether or not he applies the same precedent. If he applies the same precedent, the Menendez brothers might not be released on this attempt for parole. They can go back repeatedly to the parole board and show that they have made these additional changes in who they are and how they approach life in prison and life outside of prison.
Okay.
Maybe they'll be ready for parole.
Nathan Hochman, District Attorney, LA District Attorney, LA County District Attorney. Let's get it all in there and get your entire title. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Now for reaction to the district attorney and the brothers' resentencing, we are joined by Tamara Goodell, a cousin of Eric and Lyle's. She spoke at yesterday's hearing. Tamara joins us now. Tamara, we just played a clip of you talking to the press last night after the judge ruled in your favor. You were very emotional. I've got to get your reaction today as this is all settled in.
Still processing for sure. It really is just a whirlwind. And after speaking with Lyle last night and hearing the ease in his voice and also the enthusiasm for the next steps, definitely has refreshed our motivation to just keep pushing forward. And it has been just a really, really great time to have this with our family.
Yeah. Tell me about that conversation you had with Lyle last night on the phone. He must have been elated, he and Eric. This is the first time they've seen a real chance that they thought they were going to be in prison for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. And it was quite a surprise for all of us. We did not expect any sort of decision or step as of yesterday. We expected that they were going to send the case to advisement and then we would probably hear in a few weeks. And so to have Judge Jessic generously make a decision yesterday, we are very thankful to him for upholding the integrity and the values of the justice system.
You just heard D.A. Hochman, you know very well. He fought this resentencing, saying Eric and Lyle had never publicly apologized or admitted their lies about the murder. But at the end of the hearing last night, Lyle said, quote, "I offer no excuse and I don't blame my parents." Eric also said, "I have no excuse or justification." Did they do this because they had heard him say repeatedly and publicly that he needed to hear this? Or what motivated them to say this? Because this was really the first time we've heard them both say, yes, I did this. Eric even went so far as to say he's haunted by wondering what his own parents were thinking as their sons killed them.
You know, I really can't speak to their motivations and speak to why they did this. I know that, you know, in my conversations with them over the last few months, I've alluded to that with them and just had that discussion of, you know, what would be your next steps and what, you know, why is there this holdup, and talking about what seemed to just sort of a standstill with Hochman. And for them, they just wanted to hold true to what was true for them. And that included, you know, we went through all of these details in the first and second trials. And when it came to their statements, I believe they wanted to address their family and all of their family members. And so when we sat there and listened to them in the courtroom yesterday, it was incredibly emotional. It was so intense. And to know that a lot of us came to these incredible realizations of how this has actually really impacted all of us.
You know, if they do get out of prison, they are going to have an enormous adjustment to life outside prison walls. They have now spent more than half their lives locked up. Have you thought about this transition, about where they will go, what they will do? Are they thinking about that at this point?
You know, we don't really know where they are going. We have no idea what that plan looks like, but we have all had conversations about this, about how we plan to support them and how we are just looking to help be the safety net for them as they come out and make that transition and re-enter. And I really want people to understand how much preparation they have done for these parole board reviews. And they have completed every single requirement needed to do so. And that includes preparing for reentry into life outside of prison.
Yeah, it's always, having interviewed many people who've been released from shorter prison sentences than the 35 years they've spent behind bars, it can be a rough process. They will be lucky to have people like you to help them if that comes to pass. Tamara Goodell, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
All right, coming up for us, how better to greet the leader of the free world than by sending a fighter jet escort and a fleet of Tesla Cybertrucks? All that, plus the Boeing mega deal that you heard right here first last night on this show, right after the break. President President Trump is flying high, both figuratively and literally today, as his ongoing Middle East trip is producing enough memorable moments and generating enough commerce to withstand comparisons to Taylor Swift's Eras tour. The dealmaker-in-chief proudly trumpeting today a mega deal NewsNation was first to report last night that Boeing and GE Aerospace are closing the sale of up to 210 aircraft to Qatar Airways. This includes Boeing's 777 and 787 Dreamliners. It's being called the largest ever order for those aircraft in Boeing's 100-plus year history, as well as the largest ever order for Qatar Airways. According to the White House, it's all worth about $96 billion. Whatever the real number is, this counts as good news for the embattled American aerospace giant, Boeing, as it struggles to put years of safety issues and management turmoil behind it. This as President Trump tops his Mideast tour with even more pomp and ceremony. It was goodbye to Saudi Arabia and hello to Qatar. The president leaving behind the lavender carpet to be escorted by 8 Qatari fighter jets. And Tesla wasn't about to be left out of the picture. Once on the ground, red cyber trucks flanked President Trump's motorcade as it went through Doha. The president was received by Qatar's emir and first lady and soon lavished praise on the country's buildings and livestock.
As a construction person, I'm seeing perfect marble. This is what they call perfecto. And we appreciate those camels. I haven't seen camels like that in a long time.
Ah, those camels. Then later at a state dinner, the president touched on Qatar's involvement in the ongoing talks in Iran.
You're also working with us very closely with respect to negotiating a deal with Iran, which is the far friendlier course that you would see. I mean, we have 2 courses. There's only 2 courses. There aren't 3 or 4 or 5. There's 2. There's a friendly and a non-friendly, and the non-friendly is a violent course, and I don't want that.
NewsNation's Kelly Meyer is traveling with the president in Doha, Qatar, and joins us now. Kelly, before we get to those remarks, tell us more about this mega deal. Boeing shares have been on a tear this month, up nearly 30%, and this had to be good news for people holding that stock.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that we were watching very closely. And then our sources confirming to us ahead of this that Qatar Airways had secured that agreement with Boeing to purchase 150 jets. And we were told last night that that could reach up to a total of 200 jets. And then the president putting his pen to paper today, signing that agreement with the Emir of Qatar this afternoon, confirming that news that we were able to break last night, 24 hours ago, that they were going to be making this landmark deal, as the White House is calling it, $96 billion to buy up to 210 American-made Boeing 787 Dreamliners and 777X aircraft. So Trump hoping to walk away with major deals this week, but also deal with diplomatic talks here, especially when it comes to reaching a nuclear deal with Iran, a new nuclear deal, as you mentioned. Tonight, the president appealed directly to Qatar for help. Qatar, no stranger in diplomatic talks. They're often seen as the mediator, especially when it comes to the Israel-Hamas negotiations on a ceasefire, as well as the Russia-Ukraine peace talks. Now, President Trump sending his top diplomat, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, to Turkey tonight to meet with Ukrainian and Russian officials there. Ukrainian President Zelensky set to head there. He was hoping to meet face-to-face with Russian President Vladimir Putin, but we are learning tonight that Putin is not listed on part of the Russian delegation list traveling to Turkey for those peace talks tomorrow. President Trump saying today that he didn't know that Putin would be there if he wasn't there. The White House telling us tonight that there have been no changes in President Trump's schedule. He's set to head to United Arab Emirates tomorrow and then return back to Washington on Friday. Elizabeth.
All right. Kelly Meyer reporting live from Doha. And now for more on the historic Boeing deal. The White House expects the deal to be a huge boon, obviously, for jobs, people, American workers at Boeing. One of the company's major plants is located in North Charleston, South Carolina, and that's where the 787 Dreamliner is assembled, and where NewsNation's Brooke Schaefer has been talking to workers today. Brooke, folks there got to be pretty thrilled with this announcement.
Absolutely. Employees told me that if you go down onto the production floor inside this plant, you are going to hear people talking about this big deal. I spoke with a couple of employees who are actually second-generation Boeing workers. They told me that major deals like the one we heard today provide, of course, job and financial security, but also a morale boost for the 8,000 people who work at this plant in North Charleston, South Carolina. We were actually inside the plant watching some of these 737s being built when President Trump announced what is being called a landmark deal. It's a buy that Boeing says will support close to 500,000 jobs. Those two employees told me this is more to them than just an order of planes.
Those new buys means that backlog is going to continue to grow, which means longevity for the people on the floor. So, I'm a second generation Boeing employee. So that means those new orders give my kids the opportunity to come here as well.
It means we have job security. It means I can provide more for my family, essentially.
All of the company's 787 planes are built in South Carolina. That means planes from this deal will be built here. A source familiar told us this deal will be produced and delivered over a 7-year period. And over those 7 years, over 1 million jobs will be supported by these programs. So this is, of course, a major boost for Boeing, but also for this entire North Charleston area. They are expecting more jobs and a lot more money to be pouring in here because of this deal. Elizabeth?
All right, Brooke Schaefer reporting from South Carolina. Thanks so much. Coming up for us, a new UFO whistleblower says now is the time for others to come forward and say what they know about UFOs. I'll speak live with investigative journalist Jeremy Corbell about part 3 of his bombshell interview with Matthew Brown after this.
The time is now where you must choose whether you honor your oath or your orders. And if you have courage, you already know the answer. But for the rest of you, lead, follower, get out of the way. We live in the Matrix. It's just much more boring than the movie.
The whistleblower who says he stumbled upon a top-secret UFO program collecting UFO images and videos from classified military servers is revealing some of what he saw for the very first time. In an interview with investigative journalist Jeremy Corbell on his Weaponized podcast, former U.S. National Security official Matthew Brown describes but does not provide several videos that he says were gathered by the program called Immaculate Constellation. Brown claims that one video in particular stood out to him. He says he saw video of a UFO that looked like a large disc flying over what appears to be an ocean. He says it looked playful, that it was flying between the clouds and appeared startled at one point, as if it knew it had been caught on video.
What do you mean it looks startled? What does that mean?
It's just looking at an area over the ocean is what it appears. And this thing just comes trundling along from like underneath the cloud cover, comes up. And then right when it's like almost center frame, it scoots off to the side and like tries to get out of,
like it comes into it and going, oops, somebody spotted me. I can get out of it.
Exactly. It was visibly, that's the feeling it had.
Brown says he doesn't know what that UFO is, whether it is actually a UFO or one of our own or one of our adversaries or just something not of this world. So yes, we still don't know what these UFOs are or where they come from. But at the end of the podcast, Brown proposed his own theory. He claimed the government knows and is hiding it from the public, leaving, quote, normal people behind.
Think they live here?
Yes.
For all intents and purposes?
Yes.
Always?
I don't know about always, but it certainly appears that they have been here for most of recorded history. I think they're both just as powerful as we think, but also less. And I think there is not a single they here. Certainly multiple factions of the same species, if not multiple species.
All right, joining us now is investigative journalist and co-host of the Weaponized podcast, Jeremy Corbell. Jeremy, first of all, did you see these videos yourself, or is he just describing them to you?
Well, actually, very interesting. A lot of people have seen these videos within the intelligence community. You have to remember that Matthew Brown is a whistleblower, and he's talking about IMCON, Immaculate Constellation, which is the first thing that he got exposed to. However, I can tell you that with my investigations with George Knapp, over the last decade, we've been exposed to a lot of military film footage where we have seen some of the footage that Matthew describes. That wasn't in the IMCON or Immaculate Constellation report. This is footage that can be seen on some of the classified servers by anybody who has that access. Now, separate from that, people have leaked footage to me and George Knapp. That is not the case with Matthew Brown, but we were able to hear what he said and know that some of that footage does exist because I and George Knapp, we both have been exposed to some of it.
All right, so for example, the footage that he described showing a disc that appeared playful with the clouds and then startled to be caught on camera, have you seen that?
Yeah, I have seen that.
And is it as he describes?
It is. I've seen it a long time ago, way before I ever met Matthew, and that is a piece of footage that within the intelligence community, if they have access to the servers, is kind of famous at this point. Now, does that get out to the public? Remember, this is something where, as journalists, we can't solicit. But over the years, as I said, George Knapp and I have been exposed to a whole lot of footage, most of which we've never deemed able to put out for security reasons.
You know, we've seen so many of these videos where we're not really sure what we're looking at, but he claims to you that the government knows exactly what we're looking at and is just not telling us.
Most certainly. And we need to kind of separate these differences. Where in the part of the interview you showed towards the end, we're asking Matthew Brown to give us his kind of conclusions, his personal opinions. There's one side of reporting where we just go through the facts of what he was exposed to. The other side, we're asking him to tell us his opinions on that. And that's made very clear in the interview. However, I will say this about Matthew Brown. Matthew Brown was exposed to the reality of UAP in official capacity. He was also directly exposed to elements of the UAP cover-up, including even to Congress. He is a firsthand direct whistleblower to these facts. He did pre-publication. He testified behind closed doors. He has done everything right. He is exemplary. He is a patriot.
What do you make of that claim he made at the end of the clip we just played, where he thinks whatever this sentient life is, that it lives here, that it's been here for a long time?
Yeah, the idea that the UAP phenomenon is from somewhere else has always been the writing, prevailing theory, but there is also a tandem theory that has been with us for decades, which is that there's got to be some sort of launch and land location here on Earth, as if they live or have a base here on Earth. Now, they could have come from somewhere far away before, but there are indications, as you see from a lot of the footage that George Knapp and I obtain and release, there's a lot of places where the activity is high, which would indicate that there is some sort of base here on Earth.
Where?
Great question. Don't know, but we know there are hot spots. So the phenomenon is ubiquitous across the globe, but we have been reporting a whole bunch on a hot spot just off the coast of California.
Yeah, I seem to have, I don't know if it's because we've got a lot of naval aircraft carriers and ships and pilots who've been out over the Pacific and who have taken these videos, these strange videos. That does seem to be where we see a lot of these things, or at least, you know, things that people think are unusual could be completely normal and explainable, but we just don't know yet.
No, they're not completely normal. They're not explainable. That's why they get sent to George Knapp and myself. And we have done maybe 12, 13 of these out to the public so people could see. The reason you get more of them in those areas, because there's more hardware, there's more cameras, we have better sensor systems, we have ability to do thermal, infrared. So we're seeing an influx because our capture capabilities and technology is evolving, and that's why we're capturing more of them.
So, Jeremy, what do you say to the skeptics out there who say folks like Jeremy Corbell are looking for a conspiracy when there's nothing there, that you're just creating a conspiracy out of nothing?
Well, that's verifiably false. It would take way more than me to create something like the UFO phenomenon. That's a really cute kind of theory. But ultimately, what I'm doing is I'm reporting things as we learn them. And what we've learned is pretty darned extraordinary. And I'm really, consensus reality needs to catch up with actual reality. That's the aim here. We're in a data-rich environment. We can't have a data-poor perspective.
Absolutely. Jeremy Corbell, great to have you on as always. Thank you.
This release was the start. There's more coming.
Okay. We look forward to having you back on to talk about it. Thanks, Jeremy. Coming up for us, is it finally time to ban congressional stock trading? Way overdue, according to a lot of people. Well, that movement just got a huge endorsement today. I'm going to talk it all out with Chris Cuomo when he joins me live next. All right, the stock markets are rebounding, meaning Americans feel much better now about their investments than they did a few weeks ago. But one group of people possibly feeling better than most, lawmakers on Capitol Hill. However, today, House Speaker Mike Johnson said he will back a ban on congressional stock trades. Will it happen? People have been asking for years. Chris Cuomo has been asking for years. You've done more on this topic than a lot of people on television right now. This is so overdue.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I mean, there are very few things where the same people who are doing it are saying it's wrong. I mean, it really is kind of appalling that nobody has wanted to set the standard here, and they're just all doing what they're allowed to do. And I got to tell you, I don't know that Speaker Johnson is going to pull the trigger.
Really?
He kind of did what the president did on tax increases for the rich. Hey, I'm open to it, but, you know, a lot of people don't like it, and, you know, they're going to kill me if I do it. That's what Johnson did on this. You know, I'm in favor of banning the stock trading, but, you know, a lot of members basically have to have 2 homes, and I'm sympathetic to that, and I understand. I'm not sympathetic to it. Either you're into public service, and the word service is like serve us,
yeah,
or you're not.
Yeah.
They're not crying poverty. I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, there are strict laws against insider trading, and what these congressmen are doing
Not
is
there.
that, you know, they are hearing things
And I mean, the timing.
in briefing hearings, committee hearings. You can look at their stock trades right after the committee hearing before it becomes public. It's provable in so many cases.
It's a layup, and it will do what Congress needs most. I wish there was such an easy fix for the media, because it will show people that they care.
Yeah.
And that they get it, and they're going to do better.
All
it's
right.
a layup, and I'm going to fight for it right now.